This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 36 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we are honored to be joined by Rich Eisen. Rich, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. And I know everybody is dying to know which was the bigger day for you. The day that you tied with Chris Russo to win the 2023 Awfulie for Best Sports Radio Personality of the Year, or the day that Michigan won the national championship?
Great question. Great question. It's kind of funny. One of the ways I learned that I won this award is my oldest son. I don't know if he's got like a Google alert on his dad, but he told me that I won an award for best radio host. But the problem is, it was from some site called Awful Announcing, and he's not aware of the history of this site or I guess a group, and he thought it was an award for being awful at announcing. And I had to explain to him that this is, a little bit, and I couldn't explain to him what the genesis of the websites or the site's name. Do you know, Brandon? Like, why is it Awful Announcing?
I think when it started, it was initially meant to highlight actually awful announcing.
Okay.
And then over the course of 10 years or so, we've kind of morphed into just covering all things sports media, which includes highlighting great announcing, even though we're called excellent
right, but great announcing doesn't have the same ring to it. It doesn't grab attention. Excellent announcing.
Yeah. No.
So, obviously, the University of Michigan winning it all is something that's up there with like birth of children and marriage. You know what I mean? Like that's where I place it, just to show you how, I guess, completely irrational my sports fandom is, that I place it up there with life achievements. Like I did anything other than just put on maize and blue and root for the team. But that was great. That said, though, back in my days of trying to get into announcing and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life professionally, I was, born and raised in New York City, born in Brooklyn, raised in Staten Island, and I spent many summers as an intern for my hometown newspaper, the Staten Island Advance, and then worked for the Advance for 3 years after graduating Michigan. And many of my days on the job would be spent driving around Staten Island from event to event or what have you. And I would listen to Mike and the Mad Dog all the time. And so I'll be straight up with you. When I was named the Awfulie co-winner with Mad Dog, I definitely know the kid in the late 80s driving around Staten Island, early 90s, listening to Mike and the Mad Dog would be jacked up over two things. One, that I would have a radio show with my name on it, let alone considered to be, good at it, enough to win an award, but to be winning that award with Chris Russo, I definitely, that part of me definitely would be doing somersaults and excited about it.
I guess that's a really nice and thoughtful answer. I guess it's a little disheartening, though, to learn that it was the link to Chris Russo that really makes that special, as opposed to the awful announcing.
Well, again, no, the fact that I would be considering an award at all, I guess something is a metric that gives me anything other than just I guess support and belief in what I'm doing. But no, listen, I see frequently what you guys write about and talk about, and I clearly folks at Awful Announcing made a decision about their Twitter account or X account and how you're covering things differently. And I'm actually learning what others in our industry are saying now through following that your posts. So you guys clearly made a different, took a different approach in how you're covering things and how you're pushing things out about what everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
I'm actually finding out what other people are saying on other networks through following Awful Announcing.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you noticed that. I do think that we try to be a bit of a, for sports fans, what you may have missed, and provide some of that on social media.
Well, is that you? Did you make that decision?
I did not. I didn't make that decision, but
Somebody
I
did.
definitely had I'd say I had a hand in the ability to get those clips and put them out at a rapid pace.
Well, it's great. Honestly, I noticed the change, and because I'm trying to always notice trends and things of that nature about what's happening in our business, and I definitely took notice of that for sure.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. A couple more Michigan things. I don't want to spend too much time on Michigan because we're on to the Super Bowl, but
Yeah.
I am curious if you felt like the championship was at all marred by the sign stealing investigation.
Oh my goodness. So let me just go and ask you. So what information that Connor Stalions acquired and apparently or allegedly wound up in the hands of the coaching staff at some point, boiled down, somehow got transferred to somebody's phone, got transferred, whatever, from somebody's phone to Stalions to him being able to decode and then in real time figure it out. Do we know how much that affected a down, a distance, a win or a loss? Are we aware of that yet? Do we know that?
My answer would certainly be no to that.
We don't know
but
that.
I will say also
Yes.
that I'm a New Yorker. I'm from Long Island. I'm not a big college football fan. I feel like there's probably some Ohio State fans at the Awful Announcing website who might disagree with me saying no.
Sure. I ask them then the next time you speak with them. Like, give me the exact instance, because I did see when all of this came out with a drip due to all the ESPN reports that none of them, I'm still waiting on the report from ESPN or anybody else that finally drills down on who dropped off a fully baked investigation on the doorstep of the NCAA regarding Connor Stalions, and everything else is going on. Who commissioned this report? Who paid for it? And then who dropped it off in the lap of the NCAA to start all this? Now, I constantly, whenever I say that into this microphone on this show, hear from some of my guys here on the show, as well as people who call in, saying, you're missing the point of what Stalions did. And what he did is 100% against the rules of scouting other teams. I still just want to know, before I make a decision on whether I think one of the most exciting things to happen to me in my experience as being a Michigan Wolverine and Michigan alum or student is tainted, before I can answer your question. The short answer is no. I'm giving you the very long answer because I still don't know. And I am willing to hear it, because when the drip first came out, I'm seeing videos of CJ Stroud going to the line against Michigan. And in the background, you see Stalions say something, and then everybody's pointing to the sky. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, that's the sign of cheating. They're cheating. And then you find out that in that video, that play was on a drive that CJ Stroud scored a touchdown on. Oh, okay. So then what's the pointing up for? And then I speak to colleagues of mine who are former players, saying that means a pass is coming. Oh, okay. So a pass is coming. That's better than knowing that a run is coming. I get it. Do we know the routes? Do we know where to be? And then again, like when I'm on vacation, I normally say that's my beautiful family. Well, normally I'm not just showing that to you to show off my beautiful family, although, it just popped up the photograph on my phone. But when I'm normally a selfie guy. My kids make fun of me all the time saying, let's take a selfie, until those actually wind up in like greeting cards and stuff for the end of the year. I'm an outstanding selfie taker. But let's just say, I do hand my phone to someone else. Do you go on vacation and hand your phone to someone else to take a picture of you or your family? I think if I noticed in the background there, by the way, very nice house plant behind you.
Thank you.
Are there kids' toys in another room? Did I notice something through a door? Brandon, no. What is that?
Yeah. There's definitely.
Okay.
And here comes
nice
one of my dogs right here.
Beautiful
but yeah,
family. I'm sure you have
a bunch of the room next to me, I just slid a whole bunch of kids' toys up out of view, and then
I saw that. It's not out of view. I saw it. By the way, it's great. Your father, I have my sign here, best dad ever. You can come at the king. You best not miss. But what I'm just saying is, like, if you're you're on vacation with your family and somebody's like, oh, I'll take a picture. And you hand your phone to that person. You don't know them, right? You don't know them at all. You hand them the phone. What is the percentage of that what they take is actually usable? Good picture. It's not like monster headroom or you can't see anybody. It's blurry. The shot of the vista behind you, you can't see. So Connor Stalions is hiring all these people around the country. And they're saying, hey, I'm going to give you these tickets. Shoot the opposing sideline. And I need to see these signs. How was everything not only completely usable, but exactly what he needed to crack a code? Or was some of this completely unusable and some of the people he gave tickets to blew the assignment? Either didn't show up, didn't come up. So I'm just trying to go deep in here to explain to you that we don't know what this was. Forget about also Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, saying prior to the game or just after the Michigan national championship game, I don't know where, saying that this is on the up and up, that we exposed it all. We gave everybody heads up. Michigan was doing this. So everybody got a chance to change up their signs. Jim Harbaugh sat out 3 games, didn't even know if he was coaching up until the very end. And they got to Penn State. Sharon Moore found out that morning and beat Penn State anyway. So no, there's no asterisk. No one's ever going to take away this feeling I have right now. And they went and they retired Nick Saban and then beat the Washington coach so he could take Saban's job. That's what happened.
So I'll ask this then. Have you been bothered at all by the fact that you have to answer that question?
Does it sound? Do I sound bothered to you?
Enjoy the discourse?
Did you pick up anything that I'm putting down?
Perhaps a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, because really, whatever. I'll take my cue from Charles Woodson, who on this program, when I said to him, what if they, if I had this conversation with him about asterisk and all this sort of stuff. And then somebody, when we posted the reel on Instagrams, like, wait till they take away, like, what are you going to do when they take away, the banner? He'll say, then I'll put on my national championship hat and shirt and I'll go about my business. So I'll take my cue from Charles on that. So
say that there was hypothetically evidence that was brought forth that made it seem like what Connor Stalions was doing was impacting the team the way the Houston Astros were impacted when they beat the Yankees back in 2017.
Then he should have been better at it. He should have been better at it because the number of times the Michigan-Ohio State games that we supposedly cheated in, and the number, it's so funny. I got hear from my Buckeye fans that they cheated in 2021, and Stalions wasn't even there yet. Okay, so everybody keeps trying to put into the cheating bucket all the Michigan accomplishments against them when they don't fit. And on top of it, all said and done, they should have cheated better because those games against against Ohio State, one game we were down at halftime. We didn't blow it open until the fourth quarter. It was way too close for cheating. I wish they would have cheated better if they were cheating. They cheated poorly if they were cheating.
It seems like the rumors about Jim Harbaugh leaving Michigan started before he even got there. He was always linked to his next NFL job. But
right.
As a Michigan fan, how did it feel to finally see Harbaugh leave and make that jump back to the NFL?
I listen, I couldn't be happier for him. He did what he set out to do. If he had left after 3 years, 4 years, and didn't do what he set out to do, then obviously there'd be lingering resentment for a lot of Michigan fans. And there are still some Michigan fans that are upset that he took Jesse Minter with him. He's taken the strength coach with him. I don't know. We're still learning who else is going with him, but God bless. I mean, he left Michigan in a much better position than when he found it. He's discovered a bunch of terrific coaches who are still staying behind, including Sharon Moore. And he hung the banner. So if he wants to chase his Lombardi dream, which clearly he's been interested in for quite some time, then go with God. And I'm excited that I'll be here in Los Angeles to see some of his games. This show studio from which I'm chatting with you is just down the street from the Chargers' new facility in El Segundo. We're going to be neighbors practically. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see him back in the NFL. The NFL will be far more interesting with him in it, with him without it. He's going to be setting up shop in the AFC West, home of Patrick Mahomes, who's now 4 quarters away potentially from being a back-to-back Super Bowl champion, which hasn't happened since years 1 and 2 of NFL Network, and we just turned 20. So he's in a fascinating division. He's in his brother's conference. They're playing each other. He's got Justin Herbert as his quarterback, and he's taking over a franchise that's known for having chargered. There's a verb associated with them, sort of like Munsoned from the movies. Just to see him try and reverse all that with the Chargers, then and in the Chiefs division. Yeah, and I just dropped a kingpin reference when it comes to Harbaugh. I'm excited. I'm excited to see it.
When you think about Harbaugh and Herbert in Los Angeles, and then you think about Joe Burrow getting healthy in Cincinnati, and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, even the Dolphins to an extent, and their high-powered offense, where does that leave the New York Jets and a 40-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers?
Oh, and the complete shitter. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know, man. We'll find out next year. I'm just assuming Aaron Rodgers is going to come back as strong as ever. And clearly, this past year has been a disaster for him and for the team. And it just laid bare all the issues that they had over the last couple of years, including Zach Wilson still not being ready for New York City, him performing better, but still having major issues getting the Jets on a winning track, the offensive line being an issue, everything that happened from the guys that Rodgers swore he didn't put on a list to bring in, but the Jets magically brought in, and every last one of them essentially being terrible, complete brutal additions for the Jets this year. And then Rodgers, watching the Packers do what they did in the first year without him, and the AFC basically go on with him watching on the sidelines, no doubt thinking he would have made a difference. I'm assuming all that will stoke a flame in somebody of Rodgers' competitive spirit, and we'll see what happens next year. I don't know. That'll be a fascinating 2024 storyline, but I don't know. In the meantime, we can make sacrifices to the football gods to keep him healthy. It really is awful what happened to the Jets this year.
Where would a Jets Super Bowl rank next to Michigan winning the national championship, getting married, and your kids being born?
It would breach that area. We'd be getting close. I honestly, I always thought the Michigan national championship would be possible, and certainly in the last 2 years. I still need to see the Jets do this to believe it. And certainly the issue is now in the era of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, What we're seeing right now is the dawn of a dynasty. And I tweeted that out after the AFC Championship game on Sunday and got the usual pushback one would see in mentions where people think that I don't know what I'm talking about, ranging from that to, looking past the nuance of something I threw out in 280 characters. But you can't say that a team is dynastic with just one Super Bowl. Now, last year they got 2. And you could start to see that the Chiefs this year, though, were less than either of their 2 Super Bowl winning teams, one with Tyreek Hill on it, one last year without him. But they were also a team that looked Super Bowl worthy for much of the year. This year they didn't. And for them to come back and maybe go back to back, first of all, defend their title by going on the road in back-to-back weeks to knock off the 2-1 seeds above them in the AFC to regain their dominance and supremacy in the process. Maybe the most impressive run we've seen from Mahomes and Reed and Kelsey and everyone together over the first 6 years of him being a starter. And they have an air of invincibility about them right now. So this is the wrong time, it does appear, to be a quarterback in the AFC. Joe Burrow can raise his hand and say there was that one time when he was healthy and did beat Mahomes, and everyone else is retired. And I just called Tom Brady everyone else. Those are the only quarterbacks to have beaten Patrick Mahomes in a playoff. That's it. Brady twice for two different teams and Burrow. So this is kind of the wrong time to be in the AFC. In the same time, it was potentially the wrong time to be a superstar in the NBA while Jordan was playing, or a professional player when Tiger was at his zenith, where we potentially are looking at that right now.
Where were you during the season on Rodgers? Like, did you think that he was going to come back? Do you believe that he could have came back? Did you want to see him come back if the Jets were?
Well, of course I wanted to see him come back, just because, again, for two reasons. One, that would mean the Jets were in it. And two, from this seat right here, where I'm talking about narratives and storylines and, having opinions that come from my gut and my heart every day into this microphone here. I mean, what better story would it be than Aaron Rodgers showing superhuman ability to recover from a season-ending injury? So yeah, that would have been amazing. And I definitely looked around and thought to myself, who else could you bring in for him instead of Zach Wilson? And Zach was beginning to play better. I mean, beating the Philadelphia Eagles is their Eagles only lost in their first 11 games. We all know what happened after they were 10-1. But that was an impressive win. And Wilson started to play better until he completely regressed again. And then the football gods kept hitting the Jets in the nards with the injury bug on that offensive line that it just became apparent there's no reason to have Rodgers back. I guess bringing Flacco in about a month before the Browns did, I don't think that's a fair comparison, because, again, the Jets offensive line is not the Browns offensive line. You can't make these assumptions that, even how well Carson Wentz played in the final regular season game against the B team for much of the 49ers for the Rams. You can't make that extrapolation either. It was just a bad case of bad luck that Rodgers' Achilles popped just 4 snaps into the NFL season. It's just unfortunate, because, the Jets season depended on it.
What did you think of Aaron Rodgers' appearances on the Pat McAfee Show this season? The headlines that he was creating without being on the field, and I think the lack of an ability to, if he's going to create those headlines on the Pat McAfee Show, but then plays well on Sunday and Monday, there are now headlines about his performance rather than the only headlines being written about him were what he said was said on McAfee, because he's been doing this for years. It's not like it was just new this first year. But I think the fact that he couldn't almost counter and balance those headlines with the ability to have headlines about how he was performing on the field, I think it almost just kind of highlighted everything that was going on the McAfee Show a little bit more.
Right. Listen, I'm on the air for much of these segments. I do see when he appears on one of my squares here. And I love Pat. I think what Pat is doing is groundbreaking, and what he's up to on various platforms is something that a lot of folks in our sports industry want to have. And it's independence, and to be in charge of your own content, to be in charge of your own show. It's something that I'm doing right here from this seat on the Roku channel with a contractual window that the NFL was kind enough to allow me about 10 years ago. And so what I see Pat doing, and he wants to have Rodgers on his program. When Rodgers started going on there, it was a lot more about football conversations and his future and things that were going on. And he broke a ton of news on that program. And that's why Pat is very appreciative of when I hear him talk about Rodgers, because Rodgers helped immeasurably get eyeballs to his program when Rodgers was an MVP and talking about the stuff with his career. Everything outside of football, obviously we saw what he was saying. When I say we, not the royal we, all of us here, once we got off the air. And on that respect, I'm willing to have Aaron Rodgers on this program. He hasn't been on in quite some time. Maybe, I don't want to ascribe any sense to him or the way he feels in any way, shape, or form about why he's not appearing here or just nowhere else. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. It's just not my table. If that's the sort of segments that he wants to put out there in the media, and in Rodgers' case, I look forward to him getting back on the field and talking more football.
So I guess as a sports radio host, if you were to have Rodgers on, whether it was this past season or next season, what is the mindset that you would take when interviewing him? Is it here's an open mic, do with it what you will?
I'd ask him football questions. I'm curious to know, like, a lot of things about, when he knew he wasn't going to be ready to come back this year. And actually, it would be about the coming year and the way he's viewing everything. And then ask him about his thoughts on the Super Bowl, turn him into a pundit. That would be my approach. But I think he and I have had just brief conversations off the air. Last time I saw him was a couple of years ago. And so, I think he heard my opinions of when he said he was inoculated, and those days are so long gone and so dead and buried that, I'm happy to have him on anytime. Let's talk football and let's talk about his career and where he sees it going from here. He is the quarterback of the team that makes me the happiest in professional football. So I'd love to have him on.
So I guess part of it though is like all those headlines that he makes that are non-football related, they don't all necessarily stem from a question that Pat asked him. I think he tends to kind of take it in a different direction. So do you as a host then try to redirect it? Do you try to just almost ignore it when he's saying it?
No, I made a rule a long time ago, before I even had this job here, that if somebody says something on the air that is something you potentially don't believe in personally, or is something that somebody in your listening audience may need clarification on, or some form of that somebody in your listening audience or viewing audience might take offense to, then if you're silent, then you own it, right? Then that's the way I've approached it.
Yeah.
So with anything, honestly, the number of times that I used to do, and this is completely different, in terms of subject matter, but I used to be, doing the draft with Mike Mayock quite a bit, and for a long time, and Mike would just come right in my kitchen with a lot of, pushback on what I'm opining on. And sometimes I would stray into the lane of analysis and, on players, or I'd stray into the lane of evaluations, right? Like in his lane. And, he would kind of elbow me out of that lane, and he'd give me a broadside, he'd give me an aside, and I would watch it back. And I'm like, I didn't say anything. So, and I know deep down I was like wanting to push back on him, but my style of broadcasting isn't, back and forth that might be construed as argument. That's just not my DNA. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'll have a debate, I'll push back, right? But anything that might be construed as awkward or rubbernecking because that's controversial, I'm not going to gravitate towards that. I just won't. So my initial and early parts of my broadcasting is I wouldn't say anything and I'd let it go. But then I realized that if I'm not pushing back or I'm silent, that means I'm now owning it. So yeah, I mean, if anybody comes on the show, and again, I know you keep bringing up Rodgers as the name because, again, his platform is monstrously large because he's on ESPN and McAfee Show, which is, again, I used to be on the ESPN platform for the first 7 years of my career. I just know how huge it is. So him being on ESPN Air with a huge listening and viewing audience through Pat's remarkable success and rabid audience as well, that's what you're gravitating towards. But it would just be anybody. If anybody comes on here and says something that I might not agree with personally, or think that somebody in the audience would require me to say, hey, how come you don't see my point of view by saying something in the moment to, I guess the phrase would be push back or offer a different point of view? If I don't say anything, then it's tacitly communicating that I agree. And I just won't do that.
Do you think the Jets would be smart to advise or try to get Rodgers not to do the Pat McAfee Show next year and just try to keep all the headlines on the football field?
Let Aaron be Aaron, man. And then it's up to him whether he honestly, I don't know. I wanted to, and that's why, it should be about winning games. When Rodgers came out and said, in his post-game press conference, all the BS that's going on around here, we got to get out of here if it has nothing to do with winning. I'm like, okay, great. I will take his opinion on what a winning culture in a building looks like, since clearly he was in one for a long ass time, right? So I'll take that. And then he goes on the air the next day on ESPN, again, with a monster huge platform, and says things that had nothing to do with winning football games. So it is confusing. But as a Jet fan, I just want to, if that's what makes him happy and comfortable and he wants to be heard in that manner, then go win football games. If he's 15-1, 14 and, I guess I should do my math better, 15-2, 16-1, let's go. And if that helps him, I don't think the Jets should tell him a single thing about what to do or what not to do. I think that would be problematic. I mean, he's a grown-ass man. He's 40 years old now, right? Or he's pushing it.
40, yeah.
Yeah, so, no, I mean, for sure. And I imagine this fall's an election year, so I'm sure he's got a lot of things he wants to say on that subject matter. And if that is something that Pat wants to have on, and he thinks his listening audience and his viewing audience is into it, then he'll do it. Because, Pat, if anybody knows his audience and is talking to his audience in this business, if there's anybody who has a clear knowledge of it, it is Pat McAfee. That is for sure.
Do you think Pat's audience matches ESPN's audience?
What do you mean?
Well, obviously talking about Pat and knowing his audience, and if he thinks that this being an election year, if Aaron has stuff that he wants to say, that whether or not that fits Pat's audience, Pat has a good handle on that. Does ESPN think something like that also fits their audience?
I don't know. I think that's a question for the folks in Bristol, or what is it, Burbank out here in California. So that's a better question for them. I haven't been on ESPN since 2003, so I don't know what their viewing audience looks like anymore. And again, you can't argue with the concurrence that Pat gets on his program. Sure. I mean, they're huge. I mean, his audience is huge. And I just want to say this too, since you're talking about Pat a lot. I think what Pat is doing on College Game Day is brilliant, and is a huge addition. And all you got to do is just see the kids that are at these campuses and how they react to him. And I mean, so that looks like ESPN's audience to me. So I don't know. That is for them to decide and have conversations about. Like I said, I did my last Sports Center in May of 2003. That's kind of the last day I knew what ESPN's audience looked like intimately, since I was the one talking to them.
That's fair.
Or one of them.
Would you advise Robert Saleh to stop texting Joe Beningo?
I heard about that story all the way out here. What happened again? He texted him. And then
he was texting. Apparently, Saleh and Beningo have developed a bit of a friendship. They go golfing together, and they do a lot of texting back and forth. And at some point, I think it was that Beningo had texted Saleh and suggested going back to Zach Wilson. And Saleh responded with something like, "Are you kidding me?" And Joe took that as Saleh saying that he doesn't like Zach Wilson. Turns out that Saleh was more saying it because Joe for weeks had been telling him to bench Zach Wilson. Then he benches Zach Wilson, and Joe is now texting him to go back to Zach Wilson. So that's where the "Are you kidding me?" came from. But
so then
Joe went on WFAN and had recited this from the standpoint of saying that he thought that Robert Saleh had a big problem with Zach Wilson. And that's what kind of.
So then, yes, I would counsel. And Joe, by the way, I called into Joe's show, speaking of ESPN, nonstop when I would, if I had to peg my average off time when I punched out, even though there was no punch clock system at ESPN, back when I did SportsCenter, my average time to get in my car in the parking lot of Bristol was probably 3:30 in the morning. And so, Joe, as you might imagine, doing the overnights on WFAN, didn't have any guests lined up for 3 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. So I would call into Joe's show all the time. I know Joe, and I'm sure the last thing he wanted to do is put his coach in the frying pan. But let's also be honest here, Brandon. I'm sure at some point during December, the Jets told Zach Wilson, or maybe even in November, which is maybe another reason why Zach didn't want to get back in there, is they told him that they were done. Like he wasn't going to come back next year. Like they were finished. They basically told him, "Hey, we're gonna give you your exit visas from here." And the last thing he wanted, and the last thing the Jets wanted too, was for him to get hurt. The least they could do is have Zach hit the offseason healthy. So, so he can find another place and find a new job and go, So that may have been another, "Are you kidding me?" Like, it may have also been like, how do you not know that we're moving on from him? So the last thing we're going to do is turn to him in a meaningless Thursday night game in Cleveland. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing? Like, no. That might have been various different versions of that text.
Yeah, well, whatever it was, it was clear that Joe did not understand initially what Robert was trying to say.
Okay.
And just to note that I know you mentioned calling in on the overnights. I remember you calling in on Joe and Evan quite a bit too.
Yeah.
When they were together.
Hey, listen, man. Like I told you at the beginning of this show, I was a longtime listener of WFAN growing up in Staten Island. I remember when it first started. I remember all of it. So I always love calling in there whenever they want me to call in.
I have a feeling Joe did not like the fact that the NFL put a playoff game on Peacock. Your thoughts on the sort of outrage about putting the Chiefs-Dolphins game behind a paywall, at least outside of Kansas City and Miami?
Well, listen, I am talking to you from the set of my show, which is streamed every day on the Roku channel. NFL Network is absolutely moving a lot of its programming and a lot of its strategy towards NFL Plus. I cut a cord essentially in my household when my show went to the Roku channel after it was on Peacock for 2 years. That said, one of the things I love about the Roku channel is that it is free on the Roku through the Roku portal. So, if you have Roku, if that is the manner in which you receive your entertainment in your house, then you get my show for free. I do love the fact that my show is not behind a paywall, and totally understand why fans were upset that they went ahead and the NFL put a game behind a paywall for a playoff game. I don't know How many people got Peacock for the first time? I don't know the answer to that question. Has that been put out there? I haven't seen that information anywhere.
No, I have not. Yeah, obviously we've
Okay.
seen the amount of people that streamed it, but don't know how many of those people were
Yeah, I don't.
first-time
I
subscribers.
don't know. All I do know though is that in my mind, and obviously I've placed a significant bet with my show and where it's located and how it is disseminated on the fact that streaming sports is the future of sports television. And I proffer to think that we're going to see more of it. From Thursday night now being streamed on Amazon for coming up a third straight year. And we saw a playoff game that is streamed. I am 100% sometimes out and about because I've got 3 kids. And, if I have a minute, I am streaming something on my phone. So I am watching more and more live events through streaming, and my show is streamed every day. I'm 1,000,000% a believer in streaming sports, and that's part of the reason why the folks at Roku reached out initially 2 years ago, creating the Sports Zone, where it's a way for Roku to let folks out there know. And I'm thrilled that they wanted my show to plant this flag for them and use it as a fire hose to get the information out that pretty much every sporting event you're interested in seeing, you can see through Roku and its portal by streaming it live or watching it back through a stream. So that's my long-winded answer to say to you, I understand people could be upset that they had to fork over money to see a playoff game in the NFL. And I totally get why they would be angry about it. But the future is coming, and it's already here for a lot of streamers that have sports out there for you to see.
Do you think the future could eventually see a Super Bowl on pay-per-view or behind a paywall?
That one I don't know. I would never proffer to speak on behalf of those who write the checks for me. You know what I mean? But I think that would be a long way off, if ever. I mean, you already saw, a lot of folks, on Capitol Hill getting upset about just one playoff game. I cannot imagine. And plus, again, I mean, the numbers that tune in to network television to watch a Super Bowl are so significant. Although that said, say in my household, I'll be at the game, but my wife and kids and their friends will be all over. They'll be watching it through our Roku portal. They will be streaming the Super Bowl this year.
I'm sure as a NFL Network employee, you've obviously seen that the NFL is supposedly in advanced talks to acquire an equity stake in ESPN. How should football fans feel about that potential deal?
I don't know. Right now, I'm more, to be honest with you, I don't know how fans should feel about that. Right now, I'm more, focused on how the NFL media employees should feel about it, and what that means for all of us who planted a flag 20 years ago, and in starting this venture for NFL Network, and all of us who show up every day to compete. We are competing. We're competing for eyeballs. We're competing with content. We're competing with an 8.5-hour pregame show on Super Sunday. We competed yesterday with a 6-hour show prior to Championship Sunday. We are jacked to go to Indianapolis on Leap Year Day to start a 4-day combine coverage that now does have ESPN in the building, because we at NFL Media planted a flag at the combine years ago and created a product that others in our industry wanted a piece of. And so we're ready to compete at the draft again. We've had gavel to gavel coverage on site of the NFL draft every single year since 2006, with the exception of the COVID year. So we're ready to compete every single day. All of us at NFL Media, NFL Network show up to work. And as long as, our our lights are on, we're going to show up and compete. And if we're sold or we're part of a package to somebody else, we expect whoever does take us on to, allow us to keep competing on behalf of the National Football League. I imagine the NFL would still want to, have a controlling majority piece of what we do. Again, I haven't seen the fine print. They haven't let me in on it, or even if the fine print exists. I don't even know if that's actually happening. So in the meantime, we're psyched to go to Allegiant Stadium. We'll be inside for 8.5 hours for a kick-ass pregame show. Combine draft. This week, there's a whole host of NFL media employees getting ready to put on the East-West Shrine game and the Senior Bowl. And then we've got the combine coverage, path to the draft. We're going to be all over the Pro Days experience. And again, NFL Plus is part of that world as well. It's a streaming world that we're all still trying to figure out how it all fits together. So I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm more focused on the employees and my colleagues who show up to work every day ready to make sure that the NFL and the NFL product that we put on the air is the gold standard for everyone else to compete against and hopefully maybe emulate and try and copy or want to be part of, because everybody's a partner of the NFL, it feels these days.
Would you be interested in competing for eyeballs in conjunction with ESPN? Would you like to have that partnership?
I listen, my 3 kids are ESPN kids because I met my wife in the newsroom there back in the late 90s. My DNA is ESPN DNA. I mean, so I know a ton of people that still work there. And if that's the way it all goes, again, this is all conjecture and speculation. If that's the way it all goes, it would be kind of an interesting full circle moment for me to have anything to do that I do every day, or I do during a season, or I do for the combine and for the draft. And as long as they're ready to help us continue to compete, no matter who it is, and in order to keep our standard that we have set for 20 years going, then we're all in. And if that's what the NFL feels that needs to happen in order to move this product forward and upward, then obviously we're all. I mean, we wouldn't have a choice but to be all ears. But
sure.
If you're asking me about with ESPN, I'd imagine anybody that comes in would want to, capitalize the network and keep us competing and keep us doing what we're doing, because we've done it for 20 years and just celebrated 20 years and proud of it.
Yeah, it's been more than 2 decades since you left ESPN now. Does that sound crazy that it's been that long? Does it feel like it's been that long since you were at ESPN?
Well, have you seen my hairline?
A little different.
But I feel like I'm a fine wine. It's kind of crazy. It's 20 years, but like I said, I'm very proud of the 7 years that I had there. I still have people when I walk through the airport hum the Sports Center theme at me. It blows my mind to meet people in their late 30s, early 40s at school events tell me how I used to send them off to school with Stuart Scott with a Sports Center re-air in the morning. Blows my mind, and it humbles me that I've been fortunate to have a role in somebody's childhood. As I'm sitting here as a 54-year-old dude sitting on the set of this show, that's part of my history or resume. It's awesome. And, and again, like I said, I'm friends with so many people there. I saw Chris Fowler out here when he was here calling the Rose Bowl between Michigan and Alabama. I'm friends with, Schefter and I go way back to college. I could go on and on and on. So it is amazing that it's been 20 years, but it's gone by in a flash, and everything that I've done with NFL Network is a treasure. It's been an absolute treasure. And the fact that, again, about 10 years ago, I've spoke with them, including the commissioner, about creating this show here in this studio. And the fact that this is a show that's in its 10th year now. We'll be celebrating our 10-year anniversary this coming fall. It's something that I'm very fortunate to keep doing. And, it's been an amazing ride with a ton more to go.
Was your chemistry with Stuart Scott instant? Did it take time for that to materialize?
It did. It was instant. It took a while for us to realize that we were a team. We would get our schedules month by month at ESPN back in the day. And so, like November would start and we'd go through it. And then around Thanksgiving, we'd get our December schedule. Sometimes they wouldn't release it until like just the day before December too. And everybody's looking around saying, can we make plans around here, please? And then the December schedule would come out and we would just look, you look for the sports center on the screen, the number of sports centers that you have. And then once you see the number of sports centers that you have, you'd scroll down to say, who am I doing it with? And Stuart and I would keep opening up the schedule month after month after month and see that we were paired with each other more than anyone else. And I just remember about a year into our tenure or barely short of it, we would look at each other and go, are we a team? Like, was, Dan and Keith are a team and Rob and Roberts and Charlie Steiner and Bob Lee are a team at the 6:00 Eastern Sports Center. Are we one too? As if, we thought there'd be a press release announcing that sort of stuff, but there wasn't. And we kept on getting thrown together because I thought we had a fascinating chemistry and a love for each other that I think came through our connection through the screen. And it was an incredible ride for all those years. And I can't believe he's been gone 9 years and I miss him.
Yeah, a few weeks ago was the 9th anniversary of since Stuart had passed. What is that day like for you?
Well, invariably it'll come up, whether it's me just opening up my phone and seeing, oh God, that's right, it's today.
Yeah,
because someone has talked about it. On occasion, my wife will bring it up because she knew Stuart too. And again, Susie Schuster is my wife, and she and I met in the newsroom in Bristol, and she needed some time to, as I like to say, realize I was the one for her, and because I knew she was the one for me right from jump. And Stuart noticed that, and he kept playing the two of us towards the middle for years. And there's a great photograph at my Susie and I's wedding. I think I'm saying that properly. Our wedding. And Stuart's there and he's looking at my ring and he's holding my hand. He's got this smile on his face looking at me. And the smile on his face is, I told you to hang in there, like that's the way he looked at me. And then the other smile on the face that he's connoting is, we did it together. Like I hung in there and he played a significant role in this thing. And, he and my wife had a great relationship, friendship as well. And so she would occasionally bring it up, today's the day. And it just, it's just unbelievable because he had such a love of life, and anybody that, met him, one of the first things that was obvious to anybody that would meet him is like, that's the guy from TV. That's the guy. It was nothing, no airs, no nothing. And he would always tell people, if you have kids, be there for them and things of that nature. He was always about, love and putting it out there and being pure about his personality and what he was all about. He didn't put on any airs ever. So it's just mind blowing to me that he's not around.
What do you think Stuart Scott would be doing today if he were alive?
Oh, he'd be all over the NBA. He'd be doing a lot of what he was doing, or maybe he'd have a show like this one. I don't know. I think Stuart would be a great talk show host with a lot of people who would absolutely sit in the seat next to him because of how iconic he was and how much of a part of pop culture he turned out to be. So I think he could do this sort of thing. and give his opinions and things of that nature. So I think he could be doing that sort of thing. And I miss him. I think about him all the time. I think about it obviously whenever anything huge in the NBA comes up.
Sure.
I thought of him on national championship night because Michigan wore Jumpman, and Jumpman got its first national championship through Michigan, which I absolutely would have pointed out how Michigan helped a North Carolina icon get to where he's never been. And I definitely would have pointed that one out to Stuart. How Jordan needed an assist from Michigan for his business, as if, all those zeros at the end of the on either side of the commas, the three commas in his business, right? Or four, good Lord. So, yeah, I'd be talking to him about that. And his Bears, I think about him whenever that stuff comes up. Anything involving social justice, as we refer to it in our sports world. I'm sure Stuart would have something to say about that, for sure.
You mentioned having this radio show for 10 years now. So that means it was about 10 years after you left ESPN until you started the daily radio show. Is it something that you were always interested in trying to do?
No, it just evolved, to be honest with you, that after 8 years of Total Access and then started to do Game Day Morning on NFL Network, I realized that my role was of traffic cop, in the same way that at the end of my SportsCenter tenure, my role morphed from being a news and infotainment anchor, telling people what happened in as much of a humorous way as I could, to drop in some pop culture references and do that. I wanted to do more than just that. And then SportsCenter, because of the advent of cell phones and the internet, I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's the truth. Back in the 90s, SportsCenter morphed from a show that we welcomed in viewers thinking they either hadn't seen the game, didn't know the result, or had seen the game and knew the result, but had only seen the game once and wanted to watch it back in highlight form. It started from that to towards the end of my tenure, assuming not only had you seen it, but you'd seen the highlights almost in real time, and you had already seen it enough that you just wanted to find out why something happened. And it turned into an argument show, and I didn't want to be that host anymore. I wanted to try other stuff, and that's part of the reason why I separated ways, or ESPN separated ways with me, because I wanted to try something else they weren't willing to offer. In that same way, after about 8 years, launching NFL Network and doing mostly shows where I was the traffic cop, where I would just set up an analyst to say something, and then analyst A would say it, B would say it, C would say it. I wanted to try something else. And the way to do it was a podcast. So I started that. I remember walking into Steve Bornstein's office. He was the boss of NFL Network at the time. I remember going in his office and saying, hey, I'd like to try a podcast. And he's like, how much is that going to cost? And I told him nothing. And he said, well, go ahead and do it. So I did it, and I started doing it. And then the lockout hit in 2011, and NFL Network programming came to me and said, we're looking for cheap programming. Do you want to do it on television? I said, I'll do it as long as you call it inexpensive and not cheap. So I did it, and I did that for about a full year until Thursday Night Football became a full season of NFL Network games, not just the back end. It used to start, Thursday Night Football started from Thanksgiving all the way to the end of the season. So when they made it a full season, that meant I'd have to be on the road the entire season on Thursday nights. And so that freed me up from doing NFL Total Access, and I would just do Thursday nights, but I couldn't do my podcast every week. So he made a deal to essentially have me do it around big events like kickoff and the draft and things of that nature. So kept doing it. And then DirecTV reached out to me since DirecTV, longstanding partner of the NFL, saying, do you want to do 3 hours of your pod on a radio TV simulcast after Dan Patrick's show, which, DirecTV had put on the air already for several years. And, DP and I go way back to, 96. And the fact that Dan was like open to having company on Audience Network and me being the one that they wanted to reach out to, I was all over that. So it's not anything that I was like, hey, I always want to do this. It just evolved from, I just don't want to keep doing one thing. I want to do more things. And I want to talk about more things than just football, because football is the biggest, sports piece of American pop culture. So if that's the case, then it should stand to reason I should be able to talk to celebrities about movies and TV and music and books and things of that nature, which is what this show is all about. And it took some time, to fight through a lot of the pushback here in this studio with having a sports talk radio presence and then bringing in celebrities that have nothing to do with sports talk radio. And my competition in those time slots were doing nothing but sports talk. And it took some time to get through all that and find the right mix and find the right partners. And, with Westwood One now and Roku channel and Sirius XM and Odyssey and, having videos on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and having all different ways of going about my business and diversifying it and getting it into different forms of live and on demand and long form on demand or 90 seconds for reels for TikTok and Instagram. I mean, there's different ways to take the content that we create here for 3 hours a day, every day, and slice it up and serve it up for all different partners to help disseminate and maybe have my fan base, knock on wood, consume. That's how it's all been born and morphed into me owning my own business. It's not something I ever thought I would ever do. But when DirecTV and AT&T in 2019 decided to go in a different direction with their business, with Time Warner coming in with a merger and everything of that nature, it was a tough go of it, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to this show. And me creating my own production company, and here I am talking to you.
So 10 years in, how do you now categorize your radio hosting style? Like when you think of the Howard Stern like community that Dan Patrick has tried to build, and maybe the brashness of Mike Francesa, the quirkiness of Chris Russo, the hot takes from Colin Cowherd, how do you categorize your radio show?
I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. I'm just myself. I'm straight up. Seriously, man. I learned a long time ago that the most successful people in this business are exactly the people you meet off the air that they were on the air. So that's why I'm doing this too. I sitting on a set, suited and booted. I don't get to have a phone line opened up to speak to fans. I don't get to give an opinion or have a take, for the lack of a better phrase, but it's always something that comes from my heart and my gut. It's not something I'm just creating. So I'll leave it to you to categorize it. I mean, I'm still growing an audience. I'm still building it since, I went from satellite only to now streaming only, with different radio partners in between, and a year where I was solely on YouTube. And then me owning my business, growing it, being a CEO of something when I'm done. When I'm done with this show, I'm spending almost an hour to 2 hours a day, it feels like, on the phone and talking to partners and talking to my agent about other things to diversify or dealing with questions that only I can answer, which is great. And then being a dad, and a husband at the same time. It's a lot, but I'm lucky. Yeah. I'm lucky. So I know that I'm now veering off on what my style is. I don't know. But I do know, when you mentioned Stern, like, he is the greatest interviewer there is in this medium. Nobody comes close. And part of the reason why he's so great as well is that his guests know that they could be asked any question, that there are no guardrails when they come in and they sit in Howard Stern's seat. I'm not so fortunate to have that, but I think I will let the guests know that it's a safe space. I mean, there will be a conversation. There will be sometimes a debate if necessary, but I'm not somebody that, again, that's doing something to get attention because I'm creating some form of a conflict. That's just not who I am. That's not where I'm at. That's not my default. I kind of want everybody to join, be interested, be informed, and have a good time. That's the way I go about it.
Yeah, and I think that that take to radio, that it could be refreshing compared to some of the other shows that are out there, and at times in search for trying to go viral on social media. And I think to have a host in a show that maybe isn't, that's not always your goal. Sometimes it's refreshing as a listener.
Thanks.
Do you enjoy doing play-by-play?
Oh God, I love it. I love it.
Would you like to do more of it?
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Absolutely.
Is that something that like you could see pursuing? Because I mean, I would imagine it's hard. Is it hard to get into a rhythm when you're not doing it very much?
1,000,000%. Yeah.
So is that something that you would like to seek to do more of?
100%. 1,000,000%. I'll match the percentage. Absolutely, I would. Absolutely. So I don't know how. I mean, I don't know how to pursue it. I mean, I've got enough to do otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's materialized. Thank goodness. I love it. I called 6 games this year. That's like a third of a package.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled to do it. And I do it in Europe. It's unbelievable. I mean, those games it feels like a Super Bowl at these games in Germany and in London. Love it. Absolutely love it. My entire job is to either talk about something in advance on game day morning or this show, or afterwards on this show, or back in the day Sports Center, or back in the day like Game Day Final, the highlight show I did with Dion and Mooch for all those years on NFL Network on Sunday night. I talk about everything before it happens or react to it after it happens. Even on, when I turn my phone on and I'm now doing instant reactions for my YouTube page or for my Instagram or whatever, I'm reacting to something. You call in a game, you're like the Paul Revere. You're letting them know if they're coming by land or by sea, by air or by ground. Like this is you're informing in real time, and also you're the conduit for everyone at home to feel like they're there. And it's a totally different endeavor. Like this show, you can't have dead air. You can pause for effect or pause for a few seconds to collect your thoughts. But when you're calling games, you better have dead air. You better let the crowd noise through the television set. You better let your analyst know. You better let everyone at home know what he or she knows. Like you've got to set them up. It's a totally different endeavor, and I don't care. I'm proud of this. When I first started calling games with regularity, I called up Al Michaels. And I said to him, hey, what can you tell me? Like, what's the trick of the trade? Because I was realizing what I was doing is I was stringing sentences together, because that's what I do for a living. I string thoughts together. I string sentences together. And when you string sentences together, calling a game, you're talking over the air that your analyst should be having. You're talking over parts of the game where you should shut up, and let the crowd noise through, or you're talking over a game where the picture is telling the story, and so I was realizing that I was also then by stringing sentences together, I was giving out unnecessary information, which is a killer. So I said to him, I'm like, what's the key? And he told me, and I'll never forget it, he said captions and ellipses. By that he means like just caption the picture, caption the moment, and ellipses, ... You don't have to finish your sentence. Let the caption finish the sentence. And that's when I'm like, oh, okay. Like his famous moment. He did what? He didn't go, well, he went down and then he caught the ball and it pops up in the air and he catches it again. Like it just like turned a light bulb on in my head. And I take this really seriously. I take this very seriously, because nothing ruins your viewing enjoyment more than somebody who is just a terrible hang and doesn't make sense and says nonsensical things or tries to be too funny or takes over the moment because they like the sound of their own voice. And everything that I've been able to build over 7 years of doing this now on a national level can go out the window if I misidentify somebody in the biggest moment of a game. That's how you trend in the wrong way. So I'm really taking this seriously, and I love doing it. I love, it's like the number of times where I'm done with, this show and I'm doing stuff for 2 hours, or I'm done with game day morning, and sometimes you're doing this, that, the other thing. You're done calling a game. You take the headset off and you go in your car and you go home. I'm like, wow, that's wild. I'm not used to that, So yeah, I love it. I'm really passionate about it. And it's a serious responsibility for a broadcaster to get it right, be prepared, meet the moment, shut up so the moment can be met at home. And I'm loving it. And I feel like I get better every time out. And I'd love to get better at it with more opportunities for sure.
Is it hard to go back and forth then to have the sports radio show where you are talking as so much and then
no, I'm again, Al turned the light on, man. With that, what he said, captions and ellipses. I don't do that here. I don't have to. Here is a totally different ball of wax. And so is Game Day Morning. I've done this for 10 years and I've done shows similar to Game Day Morning for 27. The calling games is relatively new. And don't forget, the first few games I called was with a 4-man booth, which worked only because Mooch, Kurt, and Irv and I know each other's. We could finish each other's sentences. I know when one of them leans a certain way that they want to say something else. And we also love each other. And none of us feel like when the other one cuts the other one off, that it's done with malice. So there's no egos when the four of us get together. So that's why that 4-man booth worked. And then this past year, I had Kurt for 2, and then I had Dan Orlovsky and Jason McCourty, who are both outstanding at it together for the Chiefs and the Dolphins. And then Dan went back to the mainland, and Jason McCourty and I did the Patriots and the Colts together, and then Kurt and I did the last 2 games together. So I'm learning how to have different cadences with different booths, 2-man booths, 3-man booths, 4-man booths. I did one game with Joe Thomas, who had never done a game before, and Nate Burleson. All 3 of us did a game together. It was in Tampa, Cleveland versus the Buccaneers, and it was my second game or third game I ever called, and I think it was one of the first ones ever called, in the States. And I remember, looking down at my phone after the first quarter, and I it's a text from my wife, and Susie goes, "What the hell is the matter with you?" It's what the text said. I'm like, holy shit, what does that mean? And I call her up, and she goes, I pick up, I call her, and she goes, "What the hell is going on?" is what she said to me. And I'm like, "What are you saying?" And she goes, "You keep calling Jameis Winston Watson and Deshaun Watson Winston." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And she goes, "The hell you are." And turn to everybody, and like Joe Thomas and Nate Burleson are hearing this conversation in the commercial break, and they're all like this, nodding their head like, "Yeah, you're doing that." And I get to the ear of the producer, I'm like, "Am I doing that?" And they're like, "Yeah, you are." I'm like, "Well, feel free to tell me to stop, get my head out of my ass." Like everybody. But you know what? We're all working together for the first time, and everybody's letting everybody feel each other out and whatever. And so to this day, I think Awful Announcing picked that one up.
I'm sure we did.
That one's still out there. I mean, that was Awful Announcing. That was the actual phrase of it. But again, I own it. I totally own it. And and understand why somebody would never want me to be on a game again from it. And I see a lot of people. I think I saw somebody sent me a link of, what was I, the second to last choice to call games on another poll that you guys did or whatever. And I'm like, you know what, man, that is unfortunate. And it means I've got more work to do ahead of me with more opportunities. And I deep down, I understand people might feel this way. Hey, he's better at, I see all that chest pounding. He's better at, doing that other stuff and stay out of the lane of broadcasting. And, broadcasters, people in studio don't do as well in the broadcast booth. Well, who might have had that said about them a long time ago? The voice of Sunday Night Football at present, and the voice of college football for the last 10 years at present, or 20 years, or however long Fowler's done it. Anybody say that about Fowler and Tirico anymore? No, because they're awesome. And I'm going to keep doing it with the amount of opportunities I get. And I feel deep down with my abilities as a broadcaster and understanding what it's like to talk to people and what they hopefully are hearing from me, I can get outstanding at it, and this is with all humility here. As you know, I just owned a lot of mistakes that I've made. So I really take it seriously, big time. And I love doing it. God, do I love doing it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's something that it takes a lot of reps to really master.
No doubt. And it helps cascade onto this show. I just call a game on Christmas Eve, and then I come back to do this show, and it cascades from this show onto game day morning, and it cascades from game day morning onto calling the games. And, it's great. It's great. I love doing all of them. And as long as I have the opportunity to do all of them, I will.
Well, Rich, I've kept you for a really long time. I'm sure NFL Network's Super Bowl pregame show is about to start. So
I know that. Well, I also see it went from daylight to darkness where you are.
Yes,
so,
it did.
And you're ignoring your children to talk to me. How dare you?
My children are not home at the moment, but my wife just walked in. So that's
so
why
then you're ignoring your
crazy.
Wife and your dogs.
I am.
How dare you?
And the children should be home any minute.
You know what? That's awful parenting and awful husbandry.
Well, go ahead and write an article about it.
Okay, you bet. I'm going to write it out and I'm going to tweet it out.
Rich, you were great. Enjoy these next couple of weeks. Enjoy the Super Bowl, and thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
You got it. Thanks for having me on.
That is Rich Eisen. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.